Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into a piece of writing that, well, it offers a really powerful perspective on identity, joy, and resistance. And it's framed through this series of resonant statements, starting with queer as in.
That's right. Our source material for this one is an essay by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD. It's titled Queer as in, A Love Letter to Joy, to Us, to Now.
Okay, and our mission today really is to unpack the core ideas in this text. It's exploring this perspective that centers internal power, possibility.
Yeah, moving beyond those external pressures, those definitions.
Exactly, and doing that particularly through the lens of joy and also this kind of deliberate rejection of, rigid binary thinking.
And the source does set this up, acknowledging the tough stuff, the policy rollbacks, the hate, the legislation.
That's right, the external challenges.
But what's fascinating is how it immediately pivots. It doesn't let that define the whole conversation. It chooses to center something else entirely.
So let's get right into that central argument then. How does the source frame pride? Because it's not presented mainly as a reaction to all that external stuff, is it?
No, not really. The source frames pride much more fundamentally. It's called a practice of power.
A practice of power.
Yeah, like a way of living that actively refuses scarcity. It's not about defining yourself by what you're fighting against or what you lack, but by an inherent state of being, claiming space.
That feels like a really significant reframing. And what's at the heart of this practice, according to the source?
Joy. Simple as that, almost. The source argues joy is absolutely central.
But not just, like, happiness.
No, it's deeper. It's described as something sacred, even a ritual, and fundamentally joy as resistance.
Okay, framing joy as resistance. That seems a bit counterintuitive, maybe. How does the source explain that?
Well, the argument is pretty powerful. Joy is celebrated because people have survived, not just sort of in spite of pain.
Yeah.
It's this deliberate refusal to be ground down, especially, the source suggests, in a world that kind of profits off exhaustion and despair.
Right.
So choosing delight, choosing presence, that becomes this, defiant act against forces that would rather see you depleted.
I think that really resonates, that idea that just finding and expressing joy, especially in tough times, can be a real act of strength. Does the source give specific examples?
Oh, yeah. Some really vivid ones, like wearing glitter as armor.
Armor, interesting.
Or laughing loudly when maybe you're expected to be quiet or serious. And crucially, telling stories where queer people actually live and thrive, not just survive trauma, actively asserting happiness, visibility, a future.
Okay, so the source digs into these ideas through these different lenses, using that queer as in framing. Let's look at the first one. Queer as in, I'm attracted to vibes. What's going on there?
This gets into the idea that connection isn't always about fitting neat labels or categories. It's described more like a current. Yeah, or a pull of resonance that you feel almost instinctively. Something beyond the expected boxes or scripts.
So it's less about ticking boxes and more about falling for gestures, maybe?
Yeah.
The sound of a voice, how someone makes space for you.
Yeah.
That feeling of connection that happens outside of strict taxonomy.
Exactly. That kind of rigid classification system. It's a knowing that sort of bypasses the need to categorize everything intellectually.
A connection felt, maybe, in the body, in your intuition.
Precisely. Something that comes before or maybe even defies the brain's urge to label it all neatly.
And that idea, trusting your own knowing, that connects really well to the next point the source makes. Queer as in, not being gaslit into believing anyone knows who I am better than I do.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one. It's about the absolute sovereignty of your own self-knowledge, a refusal of external definitions.
Total sovereignty.
The source is incredibly direct here. It says, my self-knowledge is not up for peer review. It doesn't need translating for anyone else to understand it, for it to be valid for you. It's basically a refusal to be misnamed or defined by what others expect or can even comprehend.
That feels incredibly powerful, doesn't it? Especially when there's so much pressure to, conform or explain yourself constantly.
Totally.
And speaking of those external views, the source has this rather provocative point. Queer as in, if you were happy, you'd want us to be.
Right. This offers a perspective on why queer joy might sometimes get such negative reactions from some people.
Okay, how so?
The source suggests that when certain folks see queer people choosing love, pleasure, community, self-determination, essentially, choosing joy, it might feel like a threat or even a delusion to them.
Because?
Because, the source implies, it mirrors back their own potential lack of contentment or freedom.
Ah, I see. So the implication is, if you were truly at peace yourself, you wouldn't need to try and legislate or enforce the erasure of others.
Exactly. The source contrasts compliance with contentment. It suggests the discomfort arises because queer existence isn't sticking to some unhappy script that maybe others feel trapped in.
It really turns the focus back onto the observer, doesn't it? Suggesting the problem isn't the queer joy itself, but maybe the internal state of whoever's bothered by it.
Precisely. It's a challenging perspective.
Okay, moving from the internal maybe to the physical, the source includes, queer is in, I dance even when they tell me not to.
Yes, this connects right back to the body, movement as a form of reclaiming yourself.
How so?
Dancing is presented not just as, rebellion, but as an act of embodiment, a way of remembering your own presence, reclaiming your body, which the source says may have felt like a battleground at times.
A battleground, yeah. And the source says it's like the nervous system finally trusting safety, allowing itself to exhale.
Movement brings you back to rhythm, breath, pulse. It's this really profound physical assertion of selfhood and feeling safe in your own skin.
It's about finding freedom inside your own physical form.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of building a life on your own terms, there's this point. Queer is in. I built a life I don't need to recover from.
Oof, yeah. This one really hits. It highlights the difference between just enduring versus living a life with actual ease and alignment.
So survival isn't the end goal.
No, the source frames survival as just the beginning. It talks about deliberately designing a life with, nourishing relationships, love that expands beyond those rigid forms, work that feels aligned.
A life that doesn't require constant repair or escape or recovery just to feel okay.
Exactly that.
Sure.
Shifting from always healing or reacting to intentionally creating something nourishing.
Doing beyond just surviving.
To actively thriving, yes.
Okay, the source also speaks directly to the external world with queer as in love louder than their hate.
This is such a powerful statement about where real strength lies, according to this perspective.
How does it articulate that?
It contrasts external power structures with internal ones. It says something like, they have policies, we have people, they have rhetoric, we have rhythms.
People and rhythms over policies and rhetoric.
Yeah, it emphasizes the power of connection, community, consistent action over abstract rules or hateful words.
And it gives those specific, really beautiful examples too, right? Of community care.
Yes, braiding each other's hair, holding someone through hormone shifts, dancing in parking lots after doing mutual aid runs.
Small, everyday things.
But profound things. The source says this kind of love, this community care, it doesn't need to be understood by outsiders to be unstoppable. It just needs to be chosen again and again within the community.
Those persistent acts of care. That's where the real strength is.
That's the argument. Undeniable strength.
This next one adds this layer of, wonder and intention. Queer as in, I still believe in magic.
But it's careful to define that, right? It's not framed as believing in fairy tales or spells in the traditional sense.
No, the source calls it the spellwork of survival, found in those small, everyday acts of care and affirmation that build resilience.
Right, like a friend showing up with just the right snack when you need it.
Or someone consistently using your correct name and pronouns. That feels huge.
Definitely. Or seeing a young person look at you and recognize something that looks like freedom to them. That ripple effect.
So those are the magic, the small, profound acts.
That's how it's framed. They inspire hope, they stop you from going numb, they keep tenderness alive even when things are harsh. Softness and vulnerability aren't weaknesses here.
They're framed as strength.
Exactly.
And then tying it all together, maybe the most foundational statement of all. Queer is in, nothing about me is a mistake.
This just reinforces that radical self-acceptance running through the whole piece. Your body, your voice, your desires, your neurotype even.
Your rituals, your refusal to conform, your joy.
All of it. None of it is inherently wrong or flawed or needs fixing.
It's such a powerful declaration that you don't need to twist yourself to fit someone else's box. It's about loving who you are right now, stopping that running away from yourself.
Yeah, asserting your inherent rightness, your worth, completely independent of anyone else's validation or permission.
Okay, so shifting gears just a little bit. The source then critiques how dominant culture often tries to, frame and contain pride itself.
Yes. It argues there's this attempt to neutralize its true expansive power.
Oh, by trying to flatten it out.
Exactly. Trying to make it manageable. Just a specific protest on one day or a specific celebration. Sanitizing it for marketing, maybe?
Or sensationalizing it in really limited ways, trying to circle it with labels and mandates.
The source is pretty blunt about it, saying it's like pride could ever fit neatly inside a parade permit or a corporate marketing deck.
Right, and it states very clearly
Yeah.
it was never theirs to contain in the first place.
It's a sharp observation about how systems often try to define, limit, and ultimately control things they don't really understand or maybe feel threatened by.
And this critique of containment, it leads into a broader argument about how the world is often structured, right? The source says binaries are the grammar of empire.
Yeah, imposing this rigid either thinking on absolutely everything, man, woman, normal, deviant, good, bad, assimilate or be punished, that kind of thing.
But what's really interesting here is the argument that queerness doesn't just sit on the other side of that binary.
No, it totally rejects the premise of the binary itself. It's not just the other option within that structure.
This source uses that really great analogy. It's not just flipping the coin over.
It's melting the coin and planting something new, right where that rigid structure used to be.
Melting the coin. I like that. It's a fundamental shift.
Moving completely beyond the imposed dichotomy and imagining something totally different in its place.
Yeah. And the source grounds this rejection of binaries by connecting it back to nature.
Yes. Pointing out that the natural world just isn't binary, not really. Cells divide in complex ways without asking permission.
Light is both particle and wave.
The sky shifts through countless colors, not just blue or black. Gender exists across species in incredibly varied ways.
The source argues that spectra, gradients, constant change, that's the architecture of everything alive.
And from that perspective, queerness isn't presented as some kind of anomaly or deviation.
But as honoring and embodying that natural state, flow, shimmer, radiation.
Exactly. Acting as living proof that all those restrictive rules and binaries, they're artificial, they're made-up constructions, not fundamental truths.
So the final stance, the takeaway presented in the source, isn't about asking for tolerance from outside forces or shrinking down to fit in.
Not at all. It's about expanding, dissolving boundaries, lighting up from within.
Queerness isn't described like a country with fixed borders.
No, but as a dynamic constellation, defined by the acts of living, loving, dancing, glowing, continuously becoming.
And it all culminates in that incredibly powerful final line. We are not the deviation. We are the radiant refusal.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a complete flip, isn't it? Asserting inherent rightness and this powerful, luminous existence that just actively refuses to be defined by or seen as less than some supposed norm.
It really is a statement of being. Luminous selfhood, completely outside of external judgment.
So, okay, what does all this mean for you, the listener? We've taken a deep dive into this perspective that frames pride, queer identity, not primarily through external struggle or opposition.
Right, but as this powerful, joyful, inherent state of being, one that actively rejects limitations, rejects binaries.
The source really invites you to consider the power in centering your own internal joy, your own self-definition.
And in questioning those rigid categories wherever you find them, whether they're applied to identity or, other parts of life.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The source draws that powerful parallel between the fluid, non-binary nature of queerness and the spectra we see everywhere in nature. So what might happen if we applied that lens, rejecting artificial binaries more broadly, in our own thinking? Not just about identity, but maybe other areas of life or knowledge or even challenges where we feel kind of stuck in that either thinking.